Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 55, we will talk about vulnerable population groups. The different concepts that we will cover are on vulnerable population groups, particularly women. Then we will talk about gender equality in ULBs. We will talk about the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program. Then we will talk about the another vulnerable population group, which is the elderly. Then we will do two case studies, one on neighborhood support services in Indian cities and the other on neighborhood infrastructure influencing quality of older citizens in quality of life of older citizens in Kolkata. And finally, we will discuss on the national program for healthcare of the elderly. So, vulnerable population groups there are different vulnerable population groups in urban areas or in a country for that matters. Either these people are vulnerable because they are because of issues related with geographical access. That means they live in remote areas and they cannot be served with the different services that everybody else is getting. The other is because this group suffers social and economic disadvantages, such as scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and basically the urban poor, who are denied many of the services, and this is where we have to really be careful and we have to provide specific services to cater to these groups so that they also get similar benefits to develop or similar benefits to grow as the other population groups. So, one of the primary focus of one of the duties of the ULB as mentioned in the 12th schedule is to safeguard interest of weaker sections of society, including handicapped and mentally retarded. So, the different affected groups are backward racial groups, slum population, geographically disconnected habitats, women, children, elderly, disabled population groups, migrants. So, there could be many disabled affected groups and we can run different programs or different schemes so that these people are benefited. Now, we have discussed several health schemes, we have discussed several skill development schemes, we have discussed several other schemes which cover many of these vulnerable groups earlier. So, in this particular and also if we are looking into backward tribal population or some backward other groups or maybe geographically disconnected habitats, in that particular case we have to also conduct programs where we take our services to these people and serve them. So, we are not covering that in this particular lecture, but more or less we know that certain states are more affected than others, particularly in regards to tribal population or geographically disconnected habitats such as Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland. So, 60% of these people are tribal, whereas some other states such as Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Jharkhand, Gujarat, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, Odisha and West Bengal, there also we find a more percentage of vulnerable people, and so these schemes special schemes has to be implemented in these particular areas. But mostly in this particular lecture, we are focusing on two vulnerable groups. One is women and the other are the elderly. We have covered children primarily through nutrition programs and other programs we have discussed earlier. We have talked about slum population to a certain extent. We have talked about certain other groups also. But in this particular lecture, we will focus only on these two particular groups. So, SDG 5, Sustainable Development Goal 5 talks about gender equality. So, this is where we talk about the vulnerable group, population group, which is women in general. So, first of all, the target for SDG 5 are to end all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere. ending violence and exploitation of women and girls, eliminating harmful practices such as child, early and forced marriages and female genital mutilations, increasing value of unpaid care and promoting shared domestic responsibilities, like women are the ones who take care of house. They may not be going to job, but it's a big responsibility and it's unpaid care. So people should respect this and they should say that yes, this is a lot. This is a bigger responsibility and it's no way lesser than somebody earning than an earning member. So that's so equal respect has to be given. Ensuring full participation of women in leadership and decision making, ensuring access to universal reproductive rights and health as well. So these are some of the targets of SDG 5, and some other means of access targets are fostering equal rights to economic resources, property ownership and financial services for women, so that women get equal rights for inheritance or for certain financial services and so on. Promoting empowerment of women through technology and adopting strengthening policies and enforcing legislation for gender equality. So these are the different targets for SDG 5. Now, some of this could be promoted in urban areas specifically, and also we can empower women in urban areas as well in certain regards. First of all, there has to be universal birth registration, so we can register the number of girl childs that are born, because there has been cases where girl childs, there is a lot of people have killed girl childs, because in India this has happened because people feel that they have to spend more money and eventually the girl will go away and they have to give their marriage, and so that's one big problem in society. So universal birth registration will probably help in that. Then the overall philosophy of Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao, that is save girl childs and teach girl childs, that has to be brought inside society. There has to be awareness generation against gender discrimination and gender-based violence. Then in addition, many times school children, and particularly girl school children, are prone to cyber crimes, or are prone to cyber crimes or substance abuse, so that has to be prevented. Gender responsive planning and gender sensitive budgeting for all aspects of urban plans and urban finance. Inheritance rights of women in property and land ownership in urban areas in general, of course. Women participation in leadership, in development and governance in ULBs. There has to be representation from women groups in all sort of in ULB's governance and all. Programs on adolescents' health and sexual and reproductive rights. Inclusion and engagement of adolescent girls in livelihood and skill development programs. These are general skill programs which are implemented for everybody, but we have to give special stress on these vulnerable groups. Access to basic facilities for women and children everywhere. And finally, to empower girls to acquire higher education and technical skills. Empower girls to enter the labor market. Empower girls and women to acquire equal rights to economic resources. And finally, empower girls to raise voice against sexual harassment, crimes, etc. So, lot of awareness and empowerment could be done through awareness campaigns and so on. And overall, we have to improve the way women is treated in society. We have to improve through active, active awareness program, as well as designing programs or designing facilities, so that this could be at the urban level, so that we can achieve this within a short period. So, some of the action and awareness campaigns that are planned for urban areas as per the United Nations report is formation of ward, zonal and ULB Samanvay Samitis comprising grassroots level functionaries and women representatives from the communities. Gender status studies and dissemination of findings in ULBs. Enrollment and attendance of all girl children in Anganwadis. Sometimes this is a problem. Women participation in economic activities under self-help groups. Then Purna Shakti Kendras, which are one-stop center for services for women only. Gender sensitive public infrastructure such as toilets for women, installation of crèches so that women can, mothers can keep their kids and then they can go to work. Registration and tracking of migrating women and children, because this will help prevention of women trafficking. Ensure stopping of practices like child marriage and gender-based sex selection, so that if in case people find out about the sex of the child before birth, they may do something wrong. So nowadays it's not allowed to gender detection when during prenatal checks. Then active helplines for women sensitive issues, violence, assault. So this can be set up in urban areas. And finally, awareness campaigns to prevent child marriage, gender by sex selection, women trafficking, then promoting equal wages, awareness on women's unpaid care work, as we just discussed that women spend a lot of time at home, but they do a lot of work, but that is not recognized. So its essential role in economy needs to be, people has to be made aware of that. Against domestic violence and abuse, against dowry, and also as men and boys can act as gender champions to make other people aware of the role of women in society. So one of the programs which the government of India has launched is Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. This was launched after the data from census 2011 showed that the child sex ratio in India has fallen for 0 to 6 kids with 0 to 6 years has fallen to an all-time low of 918. As you understand, this will create a lot of problems in future, because for every 1,000 boys, there are only 918 girls. So this will create a lot of imbalance in society. So that is something to counter that. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program was launched. The objective is to prevent gender bias sex selective elimination, to ensure survival and protection of the girl child, and to ensure education and participation of the girl child. Primarily, it's a program where it's a awareness building program, and also it's the target groups for this awareness building programs or this there are street plays and all these things to make people aware of all this. Our primary stakeholders are the newly married couples, the pregnant and lactating mothers, the parents of the children. The secondary people are the youth, adolescent child and both girls and boys, medical doctors, practitioners, private hospitals, so that they don't engage in something unlawful activities such as sex selective elimination and so on. Then tertiary stakeholders are the officials, frontline workers, women SGH collectives, religious leaders, medical associations, who can also convey the message through their own channels to the people so that people don't engage in this kind of discrimination. To conduct this program, the institutional framework has been done so that designed at both at the district and the block or at the panchayat level. So overall, at every level, the committees have been formed, so that task force has been formed, so that this task force create this or conduct these programs on mass signature taking or conduct of plays at different localities, so that this kind of information or awareness could be built among the society. The second vulnerable groups that we will discuss is the elderly. So as you know that population in most countries, the population is aging. People are living for a longer period. So we have a lot of aged or elderly in our society, and this number is growing every year. And also the other problem is, in India, we used to have a joint family structure, but now because of jobs, because of migration due to jobs and marriages, we are now increasingly having nuclear families. So the support structure that elderly used to get from the families in joint families, that is breaking down. So that's why there is crisis in the family-based care system. That means earlier elderlies used to get care from their family in their home, but the family is not living nearby. So they have to relent on other support services. So this is leading to a lot of insecurity and uncertainty among the older adults. So that has to be looked into. So usually when people age, there is degradation of health, there is weakening of abilities to perform activities of daily living, and increase in dependence for financial and emotional support. So all these aspects are now missing, and elderly live alone. In many places you will find elderly people living alone in certain neighborhoods, whereas children has gone abroad or children has gone to other states. So health issues, then issues of daily living, then issues of technical, financial, emotional support, these all are missing for the elderly. So so when we design, we have to be concerned about this kind of issues among the elderly, and this kind of services needs to be provided to the elderly from some other means. Now, this external support services could be provided for daily caregiving, and it could be community and neighborhood based support services, infrastructure and facilities. So that means at the community level we can provide this kind of services, but as you can understand that external support services are not free. There has to be some cost associated to it, or there has to be some infrastructure or institutions that has to be built to provide this kind of services, which are not there in our society. At least it still has to be worked upon. So we have to look into the overall quality of life of the older adults and then design this kind of facilities and services, or even infrastructure to cater to this kind of services. Now, one alternative is institutional care. In many developing countries, elderly are being taken care of in institutions. That means because they are unable to live alone after a certain age, they are given elderlies are moved into institutional care. But as you know, it's very expensive and it's not feasible in the Indian context. So in Indian context, we should probably look into aging in place, where we have to equip our neighborhood environment to accommodate the needs and requirements of the older adults. We have to provide this external support services from the community side, so that we can provide this kind of services in the community itself and through properly designed programs, instead of shifting elderly to institutional care, which is not affordable in the first place, right? So aging in place is something which our country has to look forward to. So aging in place, as per other studies, we have seen that the level of independence is much higher, because you live alone, you live in a community, you live in a society, so your level of independence is much more. That is a good thing, because that improves your quality of life. Then you maintain your social connections. That means you stay near your neighbors, you stay near your friends. So that gives a lot of emotional support. Then it is a continuation of your familiar lifestyle. That means you continue to stay in your own place, so you continue with your familiar lifestyle. Suddenly there is no change, because you are shifted to some new locality or to some new institution. And this also leads to overall well-being of the elderly. So aging in place is of course desired, but there are a lot of challenges to implement it. So two kinds of care. One is home or community-based support services, which talks about wellness programs, which could be taken up at the community level. It could be health-based programs or overall health, as well as other support services that could be delivered from the wellness centers or the primary health centers. The nutritional support for the elderly, educational programs about health and aging, counseling services, general assistance with housing, finance, safety, etc. One of the early adopters is China, because there also they have found that institutional care is expensive, so better to go for community-based support services, and now our country is also going towards that direction. The other aspect is long-term care, which is not only the direct care programs such as health and other wellness programs or nutritional support programs. These are wide spectrum of services which cover health, personal care and other social services, such as the services which are traditionally received from the family. Like for example, when you go for a walk in the evening, maybe earlier your kid or your grandkid used to accompany you, but there is nobody now, because your grandkid's family or your child's family has shifted to a new city. So provision of companions for evening walks, gardening, reading or writing. Then meals on wheels, that means to deliver food to the elderly directly, so that they are unable to, in case they are unable to shop or unable to cook, we can provide meals directly. daily grocery or medicine delivery services, house cleaning services, sometimes they are unable to clean their houses, travel guides and other activities of daily living. So earlier this was done by the family, but now we have to provide services for these aspects. In India, several government programs are being formulated or done which looks into the health, social security against abuse and exploitation, social support, psychological support and financial assistance to a certain extent. So there are pensions for the elderly, there are health programs for the elderly, there are social security programs which are designed. So, but in addition to that, a lot of non-governmental organizations are also involved in provision of supports services, particularly for long-term care. So, home-based care for Indian older adults are now being provided by many NGOs and all. So, this, but of course, there is a lot of gaps which also needs to be addressed. So, we will talk about two case studies where this kind of services are being explored. For example, the first case study looks into neighborhood support services in Indian cities, which are based on focus group surveys and based on actual surveys of the elderly and the NGOs of a particular area. So, of a particular urban area. So, different services needs to be provided. So, this is a big list of services. I will just take you through some of this. Social awareness programs, ambulance services, arrangement of security guards for elderly living alone, fire checkup services like conducting fire checkups for elderly homes at regularly intervals, so that some, because they are unable to take care, elderly forget, so maybe they have not put off the gas. So all these things needs to be checked. Assistance on call, different kinds of assistance, call, and for that helpline services, help from local youth, the youth needs to be sensitized, there has to be volunteers appointed by the municipality for some elderly care, home delivery of health aids, home visit of medical professionals, self-help groups of elderly, then elderly recruitment drives, particularly for the young elderly, there could be some recruitment for certain kinds of activities. This could be done by the NGOs or some private or even government organizations. Then basic ration services, then subsidized transportation services, fall prevention programs, because this is a big problem in elderly. Many elderly fell downs. So there has to be programs to training on fall prevention programs and regular checkups on falls of elderly. Legal services, neighborhood watch system, safety guidelines for the elderly, because there are a lot of people who will also try to exploit the elderly and so on. Loneliness mitigation services, elderly caregiving services, and so on. Some other programs are home delivery of books, some trip organizations by NGOs so that elderly are taken for a guided tour, technology awareness programs so that they can utilize the basic services, appetite stimulation, because elderly forget to eat, they don't feel like eating, but if that is done, then they will get frail and eventually they will die. Awareness program for family members on elderly related issues to train family members how to look for the elderly. Then helpline for crime control of general things such as diagnostic services, training on use of health aids, awareness on financial awareness, and awareness on health aids, provision of health aids, and so on. So this is a big list of facilities, services that could be provided at urban areas. And this research was conducted by a research group on what are the different sort of services that elderly require and desire at urban level in Indian urban areas. And so, this similar kind of services could be designed in urban areas or could be undertaken by the ULBs or by certain community groups or certain NGOs as well. Similar to services, another case study on neighborhood infrastructure, which influences the quality of life of the elderly, was conducted for the city of Kolkata, and this was determined for both male and female elderlies. For example, community centers were identified to be of high priority by both male and female elderly, whereas roads and streets was identified of high priority for males, because males are the ones who goes for a walk or goes for some sort of jobs and all, whereas for female it was determined to be moderately high. Internal road streets was not found to be that important. Parks and open spaces, both males and females, it was of high priority. Clubs, same. Medical facilities were moderate priority, but the reason because maybe the medical facilities were adequate, or because this is not everything, this is not utilized every day, that's why. Then teaching and learning facilities, shopping complexes were of not that high priority. Religious places were low priority for males, but moderately high priority for the female, because females are more females are the ones who go for this religious temples or other religious places more often. Gardens were found to be moderate priority, whereas everything else such as space for formal practice of sports, senior daycare centers, coffee shops, gymnasium, these were found to be of low priority. So this actually sums up the different kind of services and infrastructure that can be provided in urban areas for making sure that people are this elderly are assisted with their daily living, as well as for provision of basic services for the elderly. So then we will discuss on the National Program for Healthcare for the Elderly, or NPHCE, and this is where a new architecture or for aging, or a framework for an enabling environment for a society for all ages is being thought of by the government. So here accessible, affordable, high quality, long-term, comprehensive and dedicated care services are being thought of for the elderly, and this is to promote active and healthy aging, so that elderly's age with active participation in different activities, as well as they age healthily without much of diseases, because that creates a lot of mortality and morbidity that puts a lot of cost to society as well. So this kind of program is could be done in convergence with other missions and other departments, such as the National Rural or Urban Health Mission, Ayush, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and so on. So three components of this particular program: one is the National Health Mission, the other is the tertiary component, and finally the research component. So the National Health Mission component is what we have discussed earlier, that is, we have primary and secondary care centers such as district hospitals, community health centers, primary health centers, wellness centers, which should directly cater to the elderly in the community level, also at the urban areas. And this would be for different levels of interventions that is required. Elderly can first go to the wellness centers, and then they can refer to the primary health or community health centers, and eventually to the district hospitals. In addition to that, a tertiary component is being thought of, where regional geriatric centers and national centers of aging are being thought of. So this comes under the Rashtriya Varisht Jan Swasthya Yojana of 2000, which was formulated in 2016-17, where 19 medical colleges in 18 states have been given regional geriatric centers, whereas two centers, national centers, AIIMS in New Delhi and Madras Medical College, have been identified as the national centers for aging, where specialized treatment as well as programs for elderly populations or geriatric populations are taken up. So that's why it's known as a tertiary component. Finally, research is being conducted on longitudinal aging study in India, and this is conducted by the International Institute of Population Studies, where they are looking into the different kind of disease burden and risk factors for elderly. So things, they are measuring it, as well as they are taking stated responses from the elderly on the different health issues and all. Then healthcare and healthcare financing, what to be done for the elderly. Then social aspects like family, social networks, social welfare programs for the elderly. So accordingly, new programs could be designed. Then income, wealth, expenditure, employment, retirement, pensions. So all these economic issues of the elderly are also being investigated. So a lot of this surveys and research is being conducted, so which will eventually help us to formulate future programs for elderly welfare or elderly well-being. So overall, this particular national program for healthcare covers community, it includes community-based primary healthcare, where because it's community based, we have earlier seen when we have learnt about health services that home visits by trained healthcare professionals can happen, so that the service could be provided at our individual's home directly. Then dedicated services at healthcare centers for the elderly, where elderly would be adequate machinery, equipment, training, additional human resources. IIC campaigns could be conducted just for the elderly itself. Then dedicated facilities at the district hospital, like extra 10-bed wards for the elderly, dedicated geriatric outpatient departments, as well as all the different equipments required for inpatient treatment, everything should be provided. Then regional geriatric centers, which can provide tertiary level medical facilities for the elderly, which are for specialized treatment and all, for particularly geriatric related treatment or illnesses. Then IIC campaigns, as well as monitoring and evaluation of the overall program. This is for this particular aspect, for this particular program. Now, this RGC, this regional geriatric centers, will include a department for geriatric medicine. So that means gradually separate programs are designed for geriatric services, as well as different sort of treatment regimes also has to be formulated for geriatrics, for elderly people and so on. And for that, dedicated geriatric OPD and 30-bedded geriatric wards also has to be formed in this regional geriatric centers. Post-graduation in geriatric medicine and training of healthcare professionals can be conducted as well over here. Rehabilitation physiotherapy services in all district hospitals. So this is particularly important for the geriatric population, for rehabilitation and physiotherapy services. OPD clinics, rehabilitation units including home visits at community health centers, primary health centers and wellness centers. Health and wellness centers, sub-centers for community outreach services. And finally, quality geriatric care training. We have to train our public healthcare workers who visit their homes or at the community health centers, that they can provide quality healthcare. For that, special training has to be conducted. So these are all covered under this particular national program, and this kind of programs can bridge the gap between normal healthcare or normal care as well as care for this vulnerable elderly group in the country. These are some of the references you can study. To conclude, safeguarding interest of the weaker sections of the society ensures overall societal wellness and overall economic growth. Thank you.